next step, I believe, is we should attempt to try and make this available to the nation. There isn't any funding for it, as we all know. The government's switching off funding like it's switching off lights. You know, but if there was a desire for this to go forward, we are now at the point where we can turn it into open source. We have fixed all of the data protection and the functionality issues. When I'm setting up my own business, used it to see what it would take to turn it into a system that would be useful for SMEs. And there isn't another system out there that can do what this does for project management. So it has all of the ticks in the box. We've spent hundreds of thousands of pounds of public money to get it where it is, and I think it's would be a real shame just to see it sort of, you know, contained within 5 universities who use it for a very modest portion of collaboration. I guess it's used probably less than sort of 2 or 3% of its capability. It's very powerful. It works. How do you demonstrate security? Well, it works. You have someone try and break in and they can't get it. So that's where we are at the moment. And I think the way forward is to roll it out and do something more exciting with it. And if the business community want it, then we will try and look at a commercial way that we can do that. So, any questions?
Hi, Karen Race, Teesside University, partner in Knowledge House. It's come a long way since I was last come to the champions meetings. I'm really interested. If you've cracked Hepsis, I would love to know how you've done it. I saw a little Hepsis thing on there. What can it do?
We do record against every project, whether it's Hepsis eligible, so you can export that and then manipulate it to Excel, and then once it's in Excel, you can do whatever you like with the data.
So do you know how partners are using that then?
I think Durham and Sunderland use that flag whenever they create a project. They'll take it if it is Hepsis eligible, so they can then use it whatever they like. Once it's in Excel.
To cross-check against the finance system to make sure that you're not missing.
Once it's exported to Excel, you can then import it to other systems and do what you like with it, I think.
Right.
So
that flag was requested by the user.
It was at the champions meeting, it was requested.
Yeah.
One or two, it depends what they're doing and it's institution specific, but some types of projects aren't part of Hepsis, but most of them are. They wanted to be able to say which ones were, which ones weren't. As a super user, if you like, from your institution, you would have the rights to export things to Excel. So you could then select various data in the database that you want to export from Excel, including that flag, and you could then just filter on those Hepsis eligible or those non-Hepsis projects that you wanted to include.
Right.
So,
That's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
No, it's all right. I'll go after you.
and what you're trying to do is drive inquiries into Knowledge House.
Not really, no. It's a method of handling inquiries once we get them.
Well, okay, that's fair enough. How much money do you spend on marketing to get companies to bring their opportunities to Knowledge House?
And Knowledge House pretty much doesn't exist anymore, so nothing. But
Okay, well,
historically, we had a very modest marketing budget. Most of our marketing was done via word of mouth from the academics. So it was designed predominantly to take the most significant portion of our market, which was academic, finds a piece of work, doesn't really know how to do it. Can he do it himself? Does he need somebody else to help? That's where the Knowledge House system was created.
Okay, so it kind of was focused internally in organisations rather than externally
Yeah.
to drive general inquiries.
Yeah.
And how much resource is needed within Knowledge House to, I mean, it is an open source piece of software, how much resource is needed to manage it from a collaborative point of view?
Manage or develop?
Well, you said you've got a system already at the moment. If that was provided open source to other collaborative groups, what resource would they need to have in place to operate it?
Well, at the moment, it's not actually available as open source. It would need some modifications. The SQL Server instance would have to become MySQL for a start. The rest of it actually probably could be open source.
Yeah.
There are co-fusion versions of Raylo and that you can use, which are open source. But assuming that was all done, what would you need to manage it? And I think probably about a full-time equivalent person to administer it.
For a whole institute?
For a whole institution.
very modest and light. We've had to sort of cut our cloth over the last 10 years to make it as lean, mean as it possibly can be. And I think that from a development point of view, to undertake the sort of developments that you would need to bespoke it would take no more than a full-time equivalent hall to be able to respond to requests. Because it's a user-led development, people come up all the time and say, wouldn't it be great if we could have the HEPSIS report speak to the system at Teesside? And Paul goes away and comes up with a routine that makes that happen. Now, as soon as we stop investing in that, all of that development will just be parked. And it'll be on marked time. So if we were to look at open source this, then there would be the potential for continued development, perhaps on a fee basis.
Can I ask you why you chose Cold Fusion and SQL Server rather than open source equivalents like PHP and MySQL right from the beginning?
I think it's historical because KISS was developed about 15 years ago, and that was the technology of choice back then. It's kind of just grown.
It was, I believe, as a non-techie, the most sophisticated platform that was available when we went over to it in 2001. It was the most sophisticated interface with a website at that particular point in time. So we took the best that existed.
Yes, back then Cold Fusion was probably the most advanced scripting language platform you could have. The database at the time was Access, which at the time was adequate for the scale of it at the time. It's on SQL Server now because it's rather bigger and needs a proper database that's robust and secure. So you could have picked something else, but SQL Server is probably the most appropriate for this because there's a lot of single one-off queries, and SQL Server handles those via stored procedures probably about best.
I was just really interested in the maintainability of the Cold Fusion platform. It's kind of a niche play now, so it's
well, that's when we were talking about this earlier this week about the way forward, we recognise that we are where we are, and the only way that this would be viable in the long term would to be make it open source and have a fee structure, a modest fee structure. It doesn't need to be very expensive. For instance, let's say that you were collaborating with some colleagues in Singapore. You could set up a mini version of this so that you could have a document repository, communicate with clients, with customers, with all the secure access overseas. And for something, in a project budget that you're applying for funding for, you might only need to put about £500 in, and that would give you, if we had enough people, that would give us enough income to continue this in a quasi-commercial. I mean, it would almost be bolted onto the university, it must be, but we could then continue the development to do this in a quasi-commercial
So
way.
you're talking about two models here. I mean, open source is free, whereas what you just described there was a commercial.
Yeah, well, although open source is free, we're not, the people, as I explained to somebody yesterday, the alphabet is free, but if you want to buy a book, you've got to pay for the book. So the open source, if you wanted to be bespoke to do what you wanted to do, unless you've got some magic wand that will allow that to happen, we would have a platform and say, right, we will make it so. Even down to the point of having Knowledge House versus a Sunderland logo, it would take somebody to do
that. That
it.
is the open source model now, isn't it? Most open source applications, while you can download them and install them for free, if you want them customised to your own organisation's application, you end up paying somebody to do that.
Sure.
So
Well, you have
yes,
the right
I follow
to
that.
do it yourself. Can I just ask
Oh,
about...
hang on, just the lady behind, just a sec, sorry. You didn't see it.
Go on,
You didn't see it, sorry.
You're more senior than me. Full rank.
If I put on a Jisc cap for a moment, I was just sort of thinking through other lessons learned from this. Open source is one route, I think, forward. But it seems to me that you've gathered together a lot of contributions from the partner universities in this that actually go beyond the system, if you like.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if there's a package of recommendations here that is just as viable as, say, or perhaps more viable, given where we are, in terms of saying it doesn't have to be open source and we can use the functionality, but there are other lessons learned because other organisations will be using different collaborative tools and CRM systems and so on. And I think those key principles and lessons learned from practice as opposed to functionality
Totally, I could
might
think.
be quite a useful package to put together that could then
Absolutely.
be taken by others and applied to the way in which they're taking forward
This is exactly where I am, because I'm not a techie, so I've done everything wrong at least once. It's not an accident that this works, because I've tried accidentally to try and get it not to work. And if by default we can't get it not to work, it's probably going to work most of the time, except when we put a date on in Google Chrome for the first time and find out it doesn't. So yes, there is a huge amount of learning, and the introduction of an IT project in itself could form the basis of a learning model. We've got it working, so you know, why would we
I was
do
thinking
that?
beyond the IT, I was thinking
Yes,
more about
exactly.
the
Yeah.
principles,
Yes.
you know,